The morning light always found its way gently into Emily's kitchen. It touched the curtain's first thin white fabric that swayed with every whisper of wind, then settled across the wooden table where she sat each day with her cup of tea. The world outside moved quickly, but inside her small home, time felt slower, quieter. Almost fragile. Emily had always been the kind of woman who noticed small things, the way sunlight rested on a photo frame, the sound of a clock ticking through stillness, the scent of rain before it began to fall. Yet lately, those small moments felt heavier, as if each one carried a thought she hadn't dared to say aloud. It had been 3 years since she married David, a kind and steady man with a voice that could calm any storm. He was thoughtful, patient, and grounded, everything she believed she needed. But even in the warmth of his presence, a quiet distance sometimes grew between them. Not an argument, not a silence born of anger, just a soft, unspoken space. Part of that space came from Lily, David's stepdaughter. She was 16, bright, creative, and endlessly private. Lily moved through the house like a shadow of music, always present but never loud. She smiled politely at Emily, helped with dishes, and spent most evenings in her room, painting or reading. There was nothing unfriendly in her, only a kind of quiet Emily, recognized all too well. Because once, long ago, Emily had been the same. She had grown up dreaming of stories, of writing them, of living them, of feeling something that made the world shimmer the way it did in her imagination. But dreams, she'd learned, sometimes fade quietly under the weight of ordinary days. Now, her notebooks lay closed in the drawer beside her bed. Waiting for words, she never seemed brave enough to write dots sometimes. When David worked late and Lily stayed in her room, Emily would walk through the house, touching the walls, the picture frames, the faint marks of a growing child on the doorframe. She wasn't sad exactly, just searching for something that still felt missing, something she couldn't name. On one of those evenings, as a cool autumn wind swept through the garden, Emily found herself drawn to the attic. She hadn't been there in months. The wooden ladder creaked under her weight, and the air smelled faintly of dust and forgotten summers. She turned on the small hanging light, its glow soft and golden, revealing stacks of old boxes marked with David's handwriting books. Winter clothes, Lily's things. Curiosity guided her more than intention. She opened a box labeled Lily Old Notebooks. Inside, among a few sketch pads and school papers, she noticed one book wrapped with a pale blue ribbon. It was small, delicate, and carried the kind of care that told Emily it was special. For a moment, she hesitated. She knew she shouldn't open it. It wasn't hers. But something in the stillness of the attic, something tender and human made her reach for it anyway. When she loosened the ribbon, the first page revealed careful handwriting. Asterisk, I wish someone would ask me why I always look out the window. Asterisk, Emily's chest tightened. The words were soft, yet they carried the weight of a heart speaking in silence. She turned another page. There were sketches of the house, the garden, a woman sitting alone at a kitchen table. Underneath, Lily had written, asterisk, she seems kind, but maybe she doesn't know how lonely she looks. Asterisk, Emily's breath caught. Was Lily writing about her? The air around her felt still, almost sacred. Each page revealed pieces of a quiet world. Lily's thoughts, her drawings, her attempts to understand the people around her. There were no harsh words, only reflections. A longing to belong. A wish to be seen. As she closed the notebook gently, Emily felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. It wasn't guilt. It was something deeper, a recognition. Two souls, both quiet, both longing, both afraid to reach out first. She tied the ribbon back carefully and placed the notebook where it had been. But her heart stayed heavy as she descended the ladder that night. While David read in bed, Emily lay awake beside him, staring at the faint shadows on the ceiling. She wanted to tell him what she'd found, that their daughter was writing about emptiness, about seeing beauty in loneliness, but she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she whispered to herself, maybe I've been watching the wrong way. Maybe she's been waiting for me to see her. Outside, the wind softened and the world felt hushed. as if holding its breath for what would come next. Emily didn't know it yet. But the discovery she made that night would slowly change everything, the way she saw her home, her marriage, and the meaning of love itself. And though she couldn't explain why, she felt a quiet stirring inside, the same feeling she used to get before writing a news story. Except this time, the story wasn't on paper. It was right there, waiting to unfold in the lives around her. That night, long after David and Lily had gone to sleep, Emily sat by the living room window with a blanket around her shoulders. The quietness of the house pressed softly against her thoughts. Outside, the street lamp painted a silver glow on the road, and the wind carried the faint sound of leaves moving like whispers. She thought about Lily's notebook, about the words that felt like echoes of her own younger self. It stirred something she hadn't felt in years, a longing she used to write about when she believed the world was made of possibility and poetry. Her mind drifted back, not to a grand moment, but to the kind of memory that sneaks up quietly and never really leaves. Years ago, before she met David, Emily lived in a small coastal town where mornings smelled of sea salt and coffee. She worked in a bookstore near the harbor, a little place filled with uneven shelves, old paperbacks, and the soft chime of a bell over the door. Most days were quiet, except for the occasional visitor who'd ask for directions or shelter from the rain. That was where she met Noah. He wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd, not loud or charming, just kind in the sort of way that makes people pause. He had a quiet smile and eyes that seemed to notice everything: the sound of the rain, the way light fell through the shop window, even the small doodles Emily drew on receipts when she was bored. They started talking one morning when he came in looking for a book he couldn't remember the title of. It was about second chances, he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Something about time and the way we waste it. Emily had smiled. That describes half the books in here, she teased. He laughed softly. And from that small moment, something unspoken began. They never made promises or shared secrets. Their connection lived in small gestures, the way he'd wait until her shift ended just to walk her home, or how he'd leave folded notes inside books she hadn't shelved yet. "This one feels like you," one note had said, tucked inside a copy of The Wind in the Willows. She never asked what he meant. She didn't need to. There was a simplicity to those days, to people sharing quiet spaces, filling silences with comfort instead of words. Sometimes they'd sit by the water, not saying anything at all, just watching the horizon fade into color. Emily had felt something deep then, not like a rush, but like recognition, as if she'd known him in another life where timing had been kinder. But timing, as always, had other plans. When her father fell ill, Emily had to move back home to help her mother. She told Noah she'd return soon, and he nodded, understanding even before she finished the sentence. He gave her a book that night, an old copy of Letters to a Young Poet. Inside, he'd written, "Asterisk, if you ever forget who you are, read this. You always see the world softly, and that's rare." Asterisk, she promised to write, and for a while she did. Letters that smelled of ink and sea air, filled with hopes about the future. But life has a way of folding dreams into routine. The letters slowed, then stopped. Months turned to years. When she finally returned to that town, the bookstore was gone, replaced by a cafe. She never saw Noah again, now sitting by the window years later. Emily traced the rim of her teacup, remembering how his words used to make her believe in simple beauty. It wasn't love in the way stories describe it, no grand gestures or heartbreak. It was something quieter, just souls meeting in the calm between storms. Sometimes she wondered what might have happened if she'd stayed. But more than that, she wondered why she still carried that feeling, the one that made her look for meaning in small things, the one that made her see loneliness as something tender rather than cold. She glanced toward the hallway, where Lily's door was slightly ajar. A soft glow from her lamp spilled across the floor. Emily smiled faintly. Perhaps that's what connected them, to hearts that felt deeply but spoke quietly, afraid to disturb the world around them. The memory of Noah didn't bring regret anymore. It brought understanding, the kind that tells you why you love the way you do, Why you reach out even when no one asks you to. She rose from her chair, walked to her desk, and pulled open the drawer where her old notebooks rested. The covers were worn, the pages yellowed, but they still held pieces of who she was before life became about keeping things steady. She opened one and began to write, not about the past, but about the present. About a young girl with a notebook full of poems and a woman who had almost forgotten how to dream. Her pen moved slowly, gracefully, like a voice learning to speak again. Outside, dawn began to stretch across the horizon, painting the world in pale gold. Emily didn't know what the day ahead would bring, whether Lily would trust her, or whether David would understand what she was trying to do. But for the first time in years, she felt awake, not because of what she had lost, but because of what she was beginning to find again. And somewhere deep inside, she could almost hear Noah's voice in the rhythm of the wind. Asterisk, you always see the world softly. Asterisk, Emily smiled. Maybe that was her secret too. The quiet courage to feel deeply in a world that often forgets. Autumn had arrived in soft, amber tones, brushing the trees with quiet elegance. Emily stepped out into the garden to collect a few fallen leaves, the crisp air brushing her cheeks. The notebook she had found in Lily's attic still rested in her hands, tied neatly with its pale blue ribbon. She couldn't stop thinking about the young girl's words and sketches. It's the way loneliness could be so beautifully expressed on paper. She didn't hear the gravel crunch behind her at first. A voice spoke softly, almost hesitant. Emily. She turned, and for a moment, the world felt as if it had paused. It was Noah. Time had changed him in subtle ways. A few more lines at the corners of his eyes, a softer tone in his voice, but the familiarity was immediate. That quiet, steady kindness she remembered had never left him. "Hi," she said, her voice catching just slightly. She smiled, unsure why her heart fluttered with such gentle insistence. I didn't expect to see you here," Noah said, glancing around the garden as if he needed permission to stand. Emily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Neither did I." There was a pause, not awkward but deliberate, filled with the weight of years that had passed and unspoken words that had been left behind. "I heard about the bookstore," Noah finally said, his voice quiet. "Or rather, that it's gone. I didn't know where you were, and He stopped, unsure how to continue. Emily nodded slowly. "Life moves, I guess. Things change." They both smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carries recognition of a shared past. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. No rush, no need for explanations. Just the calm understanding that some connections do not break, no matter how long the silence. "Would you like to walk?" Emily asked after a while. "Just around the block." Noah nodded. "I'd like that." The streets were lined with trees, their leaves golden and rust-colored, rustling gently in the wind. As they walked, the conversation was light at first about the weather, the small joys of the neighborhood, even the subtle changes in local shops. But gradually, it deepened without effort. "I sometimes think about that morning in the bookstore," Emily said, her voice soft, "when you couldn't remember the title of that book. You made me laugh in a way I hadn't before." Noah chuckled. "I remember. I was nervous. And you were. Patient more than anyone had ever been." The words lingered between them, carrying memories that felt tender and warm. They didn't speak of lost years or regret. Instead, their conversation unfolded like an old melody rediscovered as they walked past the park. They saw children playing in the distance, their laughter floating on the crisp autumn air. Lily's notebook came to Emily's mind, and she thought of her own gentle desire to connect, to understand, and to be present. It wasn't romantic attraction she felt now. It was a quiet recognition of a heart remembered. Noah glanced at her. "It feels right to see you again, even if it's just this moment." Emily's lips curved into a small smile. "Yes, it does." They didn't need to fill the silence with words. The way they looked at each other, the gentle nods, the occasional laughter at small observations, all of it spoke louder than anything they could say. At one point, Noah reached down to pick up a fallen leaf, handing it to her with a small, shy grin. "For your collection," he said. Emily laughed softly. "I didn't know you remembered that." "I remember a lot," he admitted. "Things that matter." And in that quiet exchange, Emily realized that some connections don't fade with time. They bend, they stretch, they pause, but they always retain their essence. The old emotions she thought had been tucked away returned, but not with longing or frustration. They returned with warmth, understanding, and a gentle comfort that made her feel seen in a way only a kindred spirit could. When they finally returned to Emily's doorstep, neither of them rushed to say goodbye. The moment was too fragile, too human to disturb with haste. "Thank you," Emily said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "For walking with me? For noticing." Noah smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Always, Emily, always." As he turned to leave, Emily watched him go, a sense of peace settling in her chest. Life had brought them back together, not for closure, not for romance, but for understanding. For the reminder that hearts that care quietly never truly let go. Inside, she looked at Lily's notebook and ran her fingers over the ribbon once more. Some secrets were meant to be discovered, not to change the world, but to change how one sees it. And in that quiet moment, Emily felt the gentle mend of old wounds, the soft return of trust, and the beauty of a heart reconnected. The morning sun streamed softly through the kitchen window, painting the room in gentle gold. Emily sat at the table, her fingers tracing the edge of Lily's notebook. The words she had read in the attic lingered in her mind, tender and delicate, as if each page carried a heartbeat she could almost hear. She could hear movement upstairs, Lily humming softly while getting ready for the day. Emily smiled. That quiet melody had become a sign of comfort in the house, a reminder that small moments often carried the greatest meaning. David appeared in the doorway, holding his coffee. "You've been quiet this morning," he said gently. "Everything okay?" Emily nodded. "I've been thinking about how important it is to really see someone." David raised an eyebrow. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "Lily has feelings, thoughts, a world inside her that I only just glimpsed. I want to make sure she knows she's understood. I don't want to interfere, but I want to be here for her, for all of us." David nodded slowly, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "I see. And you want to tell her?" "Yes," Emily said quietly. "And I want her to know she can trust me, that she can share without fear of judgment." Later that afternoon, Emily found Lily in the garden, sketching quietly under the old oak tree. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows across the grass. Emily approached slowly, giving Lily the space she had learned to respect. "Hi," Emily said softly. Lily looked up, her eyes wide but calm. "Hi," Lily replied. Emily knelt beside her, careful not to seem imposing. "I read a little of your notebook," she admitted. "And I want to say, you don't have to hide your thoughts. I want to understand if you want to share." Lily hesitated, fingers tightening around her pencil. Then she exhaled slowly, as if releasing a small burden. "I was scared," she said quietly. "Scared that you wouldn't understand me. Or that Dad wouldn't." Kay reached out, placing a hand lightly on Lily's shoulder. "I do understand, and I promise I'll always try. You can tell me anything or nothing at all. I'll still be here." Lily's lips curved into a faint smile. She opened the notebook to a blank page and began to write slowly, carefully, almost ceremoniously. When she looked up, eyes met Emily's with a quiet trust that warmed Emily's heart. Later that evening, David joined them in the living room. He had overheard parts of the conversation and had been giving Lily the space she needed. Now he sat beside Emily and Lily, a calm presence offering silent support. "Emily," he said gently, "thank you. I think Lily needed someone to notice her, to really see her. And you did that." Emily smiled, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude. "We're learning together," she said. Lily looked from one to the other. "I feel lighter," she admitted. "Like I can finally be myself without worrying." David reached out and lightly squeezed her hand. "That's all I've ever wanted for you," he said. The house was quiet then, but it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, trust, and the soft warmth of connection. Words were no longer necessary. The shared feeling was enough. That night, Emily sat alone for a moment, holding the notebook in her lap. She thought about the past, about the times she had longed to be seen, the quiet hope she had carried for someone to notice her heart. And she thought about the present, about the gentle human bonds that had grown in the house, about the way love and trust could manifest not through grand gestures, but through understanding and quiet presence. She realized that life wasn't always about what we achieve or control. It was about noticing the small, delicate moments, the handwritten words, the soft smiles, the shared silences, and allowing them to matter. Emily closed the notebook, tying the ribbon neatly once more. She placed it on the shelf where it could be seen, a symbol of trust and connection. In that simple act, she understood something profound. Love is not always loud. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes love is quiet, steady, and patient. And as she looked out at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky, she felt a calm certainty. Families, hearts, and connections are not perfect. They are growing, learning, and healing together. And in that process, there is beauty, there is hope, and there is peace. Emily smiled softly, feeling the quiet truth settle in her chest, seeing, understanding. And being present for someone is one of the greatest gifts a heart can give. In that moment, she understood the meaning of connection, the depth of trust, and the power of feeling deeply, all without a single word of drama or demand. And for the first time in a long time, she felt fully awake, fully alive, and fully at peace.